So I very much welcome our four guests today. Henrik, if you'd like to just make a quick introduction.
Yeah, we have here in the panel Rui Pedro Silva, and by the way, Rui's wife is having a baby any moment. So if he runs out, we know what that is, and we already congratulate him and the whole family. So it's been a stressful day, Rui, and thank you so much for being with us today. And Rui works for Maersk out of Holland. Erwin is the CDO, CIO of the Port of Antwerp, very innovative port. And Geert works for Proximus, big telco organization. And Anke is a finance sector banking CIO and was awarded German CIO of the Year as well last year. But before we get started, we have two polls prepared for everybody that joined us in Zoom. And I'm going to launch the first poll. And the first poll is about, are you doing less or not? So Roger, his team is do less things, do things differently, and then do new things. And so let's start with, since January, is your organization doing more, the same amount of projects, or less projects? What is it that in reality, because we think we need to do less, but in reality, are you doing more, are you doing the same, or are you doing less projects? We keep that running in a moment, and I'll come back with the results just now. So back to you, Roger. Let's start with the first part of the conversation.
Absolutely, thank you very much. So I've certainly read through some of the very interesting projects that you've all been engaged with, and I can see that before COVID, there was an enormous momentum here. Has that momentum stopped, or is it still in full flight? I'd like to go firstly to Geert. Geert, if you could just report to us on the work that you've been doing, and has this continued to have the same momentum through COVID?
In our situation, in fact, what happened during COVID was a new CEO, a new job, a new team, a new long-term vision with some very disruptive changes in there. So I would say we launched 5G during COVID times. I must say we have not sensed it. We've sensed it here and there in some type of activity, but I at least had the impression that it was only an acceleration that we have known.
Thank you. Erwin, at the port, are you doing more or less, or are you prioritizing?
At least the same, and probably even more moving forward, because what COVID did was to make home the point, or make the point clear that everything that we have been talking about in terms of what is the strategic nature of digitization in the global supply chain and the need to create more transparency, that became extremely obvious during the COVID crisis, when everybody was screaming and shouting about we need to have much more visibility on what is taking place and where is my cargo and so on, and given the resupply issues and so on. And also that society as a whole reinvented or rediscovered, to say, the strategic value of a port for bringing in goods, since that more than 95% of the global trade is maritime based. So in terms of what already had been put on the agenda and topics we wanted to elaborate and projects we were already doing, we made the point very clear what the strategic nature of these initiatives was, and I anticipate moving forward that it will only speed up the process and make even those projects bigger in terms of ambitions.
Thank you, thank you. Anke, what's your view in the banking world? Do you think the banks have really taken up the challenge? And I have to say, I can't phone my bank anymore. They're just overwhelmed. And that's one of the big UK banks. I hope that's not reflective of the other European banks, but they just don't seem to know what they're doing.
So in the banking industry, I think we have the same situation as we heard from the other colleagues, that we do more. And I'm totally with you, Roger. We have to prioritize and we have to focus. So many people telling we want to make AI, big data, blockchain. So every hype going around, they want to follow. and also every customer they want to follow. So we talk later on about the customer centricity. We should talk about who is our customer, not everyone. So only some I decide to I want to serve, and then I have to decide which products and which services I should give to them. So yeah, I'm totally with you. That's a lack of strategy, a lack of idea, a lack of visionary. So where we have to go, and normally the IT is the the poor guy who gets all this change projects and to deal with them in 3 months, deliver and speed up. So yeah, I love to talk to you about this prioritization and what we can do to help the CEOs to decide.
Thank you. And Rui, how is Maersk doing? I guess this period, last 6 months, has been quite an interesting challenge for you guys. Trade must have changed.
Solid as a rock. Yeah, we cover so many different areas of the supply chain that I can't say we do more or less as a one statement. I think in some areas we do more. A lot of customers looked at us to do warehousing, store goods, and kind of be their backup on the fact that they weren't able to clear out their stock. I don't think shipping, of course, shipping had a very large drop on volumes, probably 20-25% on average. That's a lot of, for us to say that this has no impact, this just makes no sense. Everyone has an impact. And so what happens is that companies can decide to absorb the impact and keep on going, or slow down to deal with the fact that they have issues on cash flow. So we just announced a few weeks ago probably the largest reorganization of Maersk in the last 20 years. So we just shut down Damco freight forwarding business. We are merging some areas with Hamburg Suit, a big acquisition we did a few years ago. We acquired Performance Team. We acquired KGS. So we acquired 2-3 different companies during the Corona crisis. So I don't know if we stopped because I wasn't counting the projects before, but I definitely don't think we have a lot of time to breathe. And also because, as I think I mentioned already in the last time I joined, we as Maersk, we were already in a transformation program since 2016, announced to the shareholders, and so the targets we have for 2025 or 2024 do not change. And therefore, we can't hold. We got to go. Otherwise, the ports they have a lot of free time.
Thank you very much, Rui. I've heard a lot of retailers talking today about fulfillment. Mm-hmm. They said, "Don't worry what's in the store; it's irrelevant. It's can we get it to your home in 2 hours?" That's what it's all about. And I think you were doing some very interesting work right the way down the supply chain to optimize the way in which goods flow and optimizing fulfillment in its broader sense. I mean, again, did that help in responding to the massive changes in demand that have taken place over the last 6 months?
Not really.
So you were doing it just in time rather than just...
No, but it's not about Maersk, it's about the reality of it. There's a lot of companies talk about e-commerce, not a lot of companies do e-commerce right. So you either rely on marketplaces like Amazon or Alibaba, and you can get this thing right, or what happens is that a lot of companies do struggle to handle e-commerce supply chain because they still think of it as this is the same thing as a B2B or a pallet or a container. We just have to work on an item level, and that's absolutely inaccurate. Yeah. So I think Maersk, we try to help, but the question of helping is you first need to... Companies need to realize that e-commerce, when you go online, when you go on e-commerce, and everyone sees that in the last 6-7 months has been a massive boost on e-commerce, right? Because people couldn't even go anywhere. Inditex just announced like a $3 billion investment to move a lot of their physical stores to online. But that doesn't change the fact that a lot of the supply chain built by a lot of those companies is still very strict, is still very inflexible, still require quite a large asset investment up front. So my hope, because I work for the e-commerce, is that companies take this learning, take the corona crisis as a way to understand that if you really want to be, and back to this question of who is the customer, I think our customer of Maersk isn't the consumer on paper. My customer was probably a Tesco or a Decathlon. But ultimately, what we try to do is to bring the goods or the items closer to the consumer. So my effective customer is the consumer, not necessarily the Decathlon. Because if we don't do the next day delivery, if we don't manage to get the goods at their home, the Decathlon will be upset. They will lose customers, and then we get. So this is a very complicated setup. And so, I really hope that this phase shows that this way of thinking of you need to be in full control of all the chain and own the things and control contracts and have long-term contracts, and this is probably going to be a killer somehow down the line. And FBA, just to say, FBA, the fulfillment by Amazon model, has shown that if you don't get close to that, you're probably going to have a problem.
So again, just a really interesting piece of data today. Sainsbury's and Tesco in this country have seen their shares fall by 20% in the last 6 months. Ocado, which is an e-retailer, has seen its shares go up by 100%. Wow. I mean, again, this shines a spotlight on the incumbents and the new guys. Erwin, just coming back to this important question of fulfillment and supply chain, I mean, in the ports themselves, are you seeing changes in the way in which fulfillment is being handled? As Rui said, right the way down the supply chain, you must be a critical component of it. What's going on there?
Yeah, and the central theme that I think Rui and I share in terms of supply chain and fulfillment is the complete lack of transparency. That is not a new topic, but during this crisis it became very evident what the impact was. And because you have that lack of transparency, you don't have the agility to act upon it and to try to remediate it or make the impact as small as possible. Now, the COVID had such an impact. First of all, China shutting down, so the factory closed down of the world. Then when it reopened, Europe was going into a lockdown. Then during the lockdown, preferences of consumers changed. So it was too much at the same time to say, well, listen, even if we would have agility, we would have been able to absorb it all. I don't believe that, but the impact would have been much less. So that is now speeding up, and primarily speeding up because now stakeholders start to understand that doing it on their own is not going to work anymore. So coming back to your point that you mentioned in the beginning, collaboration, having a holistic approach, instead of every chain or every shackle in the supply chain on their own, that is starting to shift. That was also, again, a topic that was evident. And if you look at what Maersk has been doing in their leading role in digitizing the maritime part and saying we want to go end-to-end visibility for our customers, that is a point made home now. And Maersk is now is taking advantages of being the front runner, and we've always saluted that. And we as a port, we want to do that with the ecosystem themselves. But of course, you can't do that in a compromised way. This crisis has made clear that gutsy calls and bold moves need to be taken. And for those of them who still are trying to figure out what digitization means to them, if at all they want to see it as an opportunity, well, you lost your opportunity, and it's speeding up now. So, and also seeing how fast European policy was to pick it up. Last week they decided a regulation to be that all the transportation documents by 2024 have to be digital. That's putting a stick in the ground moving forward and saying, listen guys, we heard enough excuses for not doing stuff. This is what's going to happen, and you'd rather be bloody fast, right?
So I think one of you, perhaps yourself, Erwin, or you, Rui, talked about the digital twin concepts right down the supply chain. And I mean, I mentioned Unilever, Avon, Tate & Lyle, people that we talk to are saying, we have to go straight to the consumer. We can't go through the retailer anymore. These guys just don't give us visibility of what demand is out there. And again, if we really look at the success of the digital leaders, these are guys who are tracking customer demand second by second. They know every interaction in every country of the world, and they know exactly what the customer wants. I mean, how do we get greater adaptability, flexibility into this supply chain? And you've talked a lot about the challenges, but can we really deliver this? Owen.
If you look at what we're doing in Antwerp with the data sharing platform, that's exactly the kind of lever we want to put on the table to make sure that all these stakeholders share accurate, timely information so that others can act upon it. But that, of course, is putting the big elephant in the room on the table, saying, well, there is the need to be trust and willingness to share. And that sounds, objectively speaking, like a very obvious thing, but it is not. So, and that took us time to get that on the table. We've managed because of COVID, amongst others, to get a breakthrough where now everybody said, okay, we get it. But yeah, in all honesty, it took a crisis like COVID to get the message.
Erwin,
get a commitment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Anke.
Can you tell me why it is so difficult to tell them that it's important to share this data? So for me and for you, and we have the same problems. For me, it's totally clear, but I have no idea how I can convince them that they...
Anyone fluent in game theory would probably be able to tell you that, but you have an enormous amount of stakeholders going from global players with global presence to local players. And some of them, not to say a lot of them, their business model is based on lack of transparency, because then they say, listen, Mr. Customer, being a cargo owner or whatever, we'll take that complexity away from you. We'll do it for you. But at the end of the day, it leaves a lot of inefficiencies. And as long as everybody's making a living, okay, that's fine. But those days are gone.
Yeah, but they should know right now that those days are gone. So,
yeah, for sure. And okay, all of them get it. Again, look at that front runners like Maersk. But some of them local players, listen, they have been looking at it. They're afraid of it. But that's, I think, common across many sectors where you have people who get it and act upon it proactively and turn a challenge into an opportunity. And you have those who wait until they're run over. That's a given thing everywhere.
Yes.
That was now you see that happening with digital. In previous times you have the same thing. That's part of being a company that sees evolutions and tries to take advantage of that. That's being an entrepreneur one-on-one, you know.
But I think
just sorry, Rui, go ahead.
I was just saying, but I also think we have in the fairness of I think as we had a huge progress even before the coronavirus. So you see, look at this at the freight forwarding. You see, they changed their name now, but Sheep Hub, and you have Twill, you have Schiphol in the Netherlands, the startup of the year in 2018. Those are digital freight forwarders that have conquered quite a lot of markets compared to the traditional heavy lifting freight forwarders. You have TradeLens that is Maersk, but it doesn't really matter. I think the TradeLens concept where you connect a lot of different nodes of the supply chain through one single platform. We got competitors of Maersk joining. And there is the Digital Container Association, I don't know if it's the right name, where it's bringing up standards a bit like what we had in the banking side, right, with the SEPAs and stuff like that, where we have, right? Now, yeah, but I think in to be really fair, I strongly believe we made probably in the last 12 to 18 months really huge steps forward in regards to transparency. And what's going to happen is that smaller companies or companies that rely on lack of transparency, because the big players and the common infrastructure is moving towards that, they will have no other chance, because pricing itself, is a rate game anyways, being squeezed as much as you can. So if you don't offer anything else other than just a price that is probably $1 cheaper, and still is not very clear, you're out of the market. So I really believe next 4 or 5 years we're going to see a massive improvement within the shipping, or let's say transportation industry.
Yeah, for sure. You see it speeding up. If I compare that to 3 years ago, the speed at which things are changing is dramatically increasing. We also feel that with all the initiatives taking place in and around the port, and if leading carriers and leading ports are levers in that process, and seeing COVID now as an opportunity to get the message across, we will live in a totally different environment in the global supply chain 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Also, if you link that to regulation, like the European ones who want to really push digitization forward and not waiting or not any longer allowing excuses for not doing things.
Yeah.
So,
Can I just come in, Geert? We've been talking about the physical supply chain.
Well, if I heard my colleagues, I was becoming a little bit jealous, in fact.
Indeed.
No, truly, but truly, because I really have the impression that COVID brought additional insights, another type of dynamic, and I agree. What they say is also. Yeah, it's also what we need in the telco sector. Also in telco, in fact, it can only work if we are more open, if we collaborate, if the process works end to end. And I'm going to give you just a very small example. When COVID hit us, we said, okay, there are no people in the street anymore, so let's accelerate our fiber build in the centers of cities, because otherwise no mobility impact any longer, etc. But when we stepped to the administrations could not deliver permits at that moment in time. So what I'm thinking now is that we should maybe better anticipate for the unknown and the unplanned. But the problem that you often have, or the challenge that you have, is that if you stand in there alone on yourself, it doesn't work. You need all the others. You need the eco model. So the reflection like you're having then in the world of Rui and Erwin, well, we should have that kind of reflection in each industry. But where you bring all the different stakeholders around the table, and that you say, listen, this cannot happen anymore, that things were frozen. No, we should see if unplanned things happen, like a COVID, well, how can we take the positive out of it to accelerate maybe another number of elements? So I'm a little bit jealous, but it's also inspiring. I'll take it with me in my next coming speeches. But we should copy paste throughout the different industries. And then also other example. Well, we know, for example, with COVID, I had at a certain moment in time, and 95% of our employees, they were working at home. Digital highways like fiber, 5G, so crucial. Well, let's now bring with all stakeholders the incentives to kind of get it ongoing. And there again, the collaboration will be crucial. And that is not only about telco operators. I'm not talking here for my own sector. But it's about, again, politicians. Politicians, they have a crucial role in there to play. Cooperation with industry, cooperation with our enterprise customers, cooperation with startups. So you see, success is again about bringing our assets together, bringing our capabilities together and open it up. The new keyword for me is open. The other one is around continuity and sustainability. So probably also the local component. I find that amazing, that at a certain moment in time, and I have it here, we had to give this to doctors and people and nurses working in hospitals. And this is a piece of, what is it? Paper tissue with 2 cords. Mm-hmm. And we could not deliver this to people like my brother who is working in a hospital. We had to make it ourselves. But then I say there is something wrong with continuity, with local dynamics, with eco models. We have given certain things away to certain players out there that have taken it all. And then at a certain moment we say we're in a full crisis, and look at us. It was shameful, honestly. That should not happen anymore. So it is about open, collaborate, sustainability, local dimensions, and so I'm also pleading that we all stand up and we all reflect a bit on what this COVID crisis learned us. Are we now well prepared? Because nothing is excluding, that within some weeks we will have again lockdowns.
Yeah.
Nothing is excluding that. Are we well prepared? What did we do? I'm jealous and a bit,
We're not yet in Walt Disneyland, eh? We still have a lot to do, so don't get it wrong, right?
No, easy.
I'm going to challenge you, Geert, because you are the highway into the home. Every bit of data that us workers, consumers generate goes through your networks.
Yeah.
Are you getting more value from that?
Oh yeah, but that
explosion of data. Are you, as an organization, getting more value?
Yes, we have. That is for sure. To give you an idea, in a customer home, we're measuring 400 parameters. 400 constantly. Wow. Yeah, 400 that come in, terabytes of data, etc. Do we already use that? And is this giving us business value? For sure. Based on that, we could do more predictions. We could bring more recommendations towards our customers, because what we have also seen with, for example, COVID, we had still a lot of our activity where we serviced our customers as well through field engineers, field technicians. There is something wrong, okay, a field technician comes over. But what have you seen in the previous crisis is that people were a bit afraid of having people. Because a technician, he comes into your living room, in fact. There the reflection of doing way more digital, doing way more in a kind of recommendation, helping out in a digital way our customers so that they can do more themselves if something happens. Due to the data that we capture is for sure. It was already there before COVID, but it's only more true now. Installations, a lot of our installations are still installations through technicians that come over to your place. How can we fundamentally change that? And that it becomes still way more plug and play. The data is there, so important, because due to the data we can make the process easier, and we can really guide that customer. Listen, you did not plug your HDMI cable in, by the way. Yeah, you bought your new TV or whatever, or it's not the right one that is plugged in, which is not giving you the right image, etc. That you can bring these recommendations on the screen that he's using at that moment in time, and as such navigate more the customer in a kind of self-support.
Excellent. Can I move this conversation on? Because one of the things that continues to plague us all really is legacy. And we look at these digital natives and we say, well, they're wonderful, they started from a different place. But clearly we've got to get to the same place. We've got to really have that data around the customer centricity, the right ways of engaging with the customer online, through omni-channels, etc. Can we work effectively with the systems, the structures, the processes that we have today? And I'd really like to go to Anke in the banking world, because I honestly don't see much change in the UK banking system. I see a lot of startups who offer the world, but I don't actually see that having much impression on the big banks. They seem to hold their own, and yet they offer a very poor service, really, as a consumer of banking services. They're impersonal. They look at me as an account rather than a customer. So defend yourself, please, Anke. What are the big banks going to do about their legacy?
Yeah, we have obviously the problem with legacy, and that is okay. But what is not okay is that we don't accept these problems, so we don't work on them. And if we work on them, that's what I mentioned before, is we just do an AI strategy and big data strategy based on this old legacy, or we just do microservices because it's hype to make microservices. So coming back to your customer centricity or strategy, so that's the discussion, who is my customer? And that's very important for a bank. So in Germany, a bank thinks 80 million people in Germany. So I wouldn't say that auto manufacturer, a car manufacturer thinks about 80 million people are his customers. So who are your customers? And if you want to serve 80 million, then it's maybe difficult to have all the processes for all these different people. So start thinking about who is your customer. Start thinking about which services need these customers, and then design the processes. And then based on these processes, design your technology. And this way around, so start with the customer, start with the needed processes and so products and services, and then design the architecture behind that. And don't try, and that's what you already mentioned, try to, put the old processes in new technology, or work in these legacy developments, 20-year-old, and try to put the new processes in. And that's, I would say, not really understood. I would say not really understood that this should be done. And if it's understood, then they don't work consequently on that. So that's, I would say, the biggest issue. They don't understand the customer because they think about 80 million customer. They don't try to focus and then try to start the right projects and do this in a different way as they did it before. So banks, for example, always try to do it alone. Always, because it's my data. They don't collaborate between the sectors. So in Germany, we have the Sparkassen, Genossenschafts, and private banks. They don't collaborate with Google and Amazon. They just think they are big enough and can do it alone. That's, I would say, the biggest issue in the German banks.
So, other panelists, what are you doing about your legacy? Are you going to be able to get rid of it? Are you going to live with it? Are you going to complement it? Enhance it? Rui, what are you going to do with your legacy? You must have lots of it, I'm sure, in Maersk.
I think anything we did yesterday is legacy, right?
Preferably 30, 40-year-old transaction systems. There are plenty around. Yeah.
I don't always have opinions that are completely unanimous. So I don't necessarily look at that legacy in the same way as such a killing thing. I think it's all has to do with going back to what Geert said. I'm a sociologist by education, so I strongly believe that we have a lot of problems that are probably harder to fix than legacy, and take a lot less attention. I usually say that we love to build transformations on a minefield. I would love to see people building their house on a minefield, but we build transformations on that. So we just wait until the next step we do on a mine and just. So legacy or not legacy, what's relevant is, I think Anke mentioned that the process is important. It's important to know what is it you're trying to achieve. It's not the cool technology, is what is your target. Sometimes for a company, it's perfectly fine to run on a monolithical, non-API based. I don't know. I have no clue. I don't know their business. I don't know their customers. I don't know what they want trying to do. It doesn't necessarily need to be on the coolest new stuff coming on LinkedIn that makes everything pop up. And a friend of mine yesterday shared an interesting thing. Everyone has cool job titles in LinkedIn. Everything is fancy, right? So we look fancy. There's no one anymore having a normal job. Everyone looks like the next jobs. It doesn't matter what job you have. And I think this reflects also on corporate behaviors, on company behaviors. We are continuously looking to the next fancy thing to give us this company leverage, to give us a next step on a career, to make it look cool from an organizational standpoint. Sometimes we look at legacy systems and we replace them by something that is not better or even less legacy. It's just different. It's just something else. So I would love, and Geert mentioned about this collaboration in companies. I would like that we would do a deeper look at why we fail so often, why we still fail very often. Even though I made it sound like logistics is going fine, we still fail a lot. And even when we are running new technologies not on top of legacies, we still fail a lot. And so rather than looking at do we want to replace legacy, sometimes we got to start understanding is how do we effectively roll out technology and how do we prepare companies to deal with the technology irrespective of when they were built and what age they've been deployed.
Sorry,
If you allow me to pick up on that, well, first of all, my definition of legacy is that stuff that at least works. And I salute people who built a system that still runs after 40 years. I would like to see that happening with the systems we build today. And if it's called legacy because it's not in line with the new strategic focus areas or process or whatever, well, the legacy is what you have based on the decisions of the past. So if it was focusing on operational efficiency, that's what you have. So the question then is not, it's not technology that's the issue, it's, okay, the clearness in your vision, the strategic alignment on what do we want to achieve by when. And if that's clear, what I've seen is that 3 years ago, which were purely operational systems from the perspective of the Port Authority, can be transformed into something which is much more stakeholder driven, which in a certain sense for us are clients. Yep. To go after, okay, let's make sure that we provide value to people outside our own company so that in return we get the benefits. And it's not revenue, but to make sure that we are better positioned to be operational efficient and competitive in bringing ships into the port and so on. Because we have operational data that historically we only used to send out an invoice. We gave you a tugboat and you pass through the lock, so this is the invoice. Now we're using that data to be predictive and prescriptive with regards to what's going to hit us 5, 6, 7 hours into the future. But we're still doing that using these legacy systems because that's the foundation you're building on. So the tone of voice in a lot of discussions with regard to legacy for me is completely and utterly wrong. And then of course you take the wrong decisions like we're going to replace legacy. Then you're into something which is going to take you 5 to 10 years and 100% sure you're not going to end up where you anticipated to be because the world has changed over. So if you want to have speed to market and so on, for God's sake, don't throw out everything that is legacy. Try to open it up. Make sure that the data that comes out of it is reliable, which is often the biggest issue you have. And because everybody says data, the new oil and so on. Yeah, but why does everybody then treat it as if it was garbage? That's maybe the most important thing. And then finally, make sure that what you're trying to do is clear for everyone and that you have an approach where you can move in little baby steps, learn as you move along and adapt, because that's the new way of doing things. That is 10 times more important than just saying, well, this is old technology. Yeah, but it still runs. So what's the issue?
Yep. But maybe you have a different view about legacy. In banks, legacy is point to point. And it's so old that my developers will retire in 5 years. So I have an issue with legacy. I can't work with them. So it's stable a little bit. But if I change things in this legacy systems, normally I don't know exactly what is the result and which performance issues I have and which things about. So I have real problems with my legacy because of this, this decision of the past. We have to deliver fast. We have to deliver the regulatory milestones, just bring it in production. So we have to do something with our legacy, but I'm totally with you. We have to do it differently. We have to think about what is now our problem, what is now our customer, our process, our services, and then build it based on this things and not based on the things you decided 20 years ago.
Can I just bring Geert into the conversation? Because again, I know banks, insurance companies, telcos, governments all have big transaction systems, most of which were built, certainly in the UK, in the 70s and the 80s. Geert, are your own legacy systems a challenge, a barrier?
But the biggest problem that I see in legacy is not on technologies itself, because some of those old technologies, they can work perfectly fine even in this speedy world. The biggest problem that we have is in fact that some of our capabilities, they are spread over many places in the landscape. And if you want to have speed in your front ends, you have to rely on capabilities underneath. And if there's a same or an alike capability is spread on too much places, well, then you really have an issue. So What we're trying to do is more steer it from there, look at what are those key capabilities that we need to tackle first, where are they everywhere sitting, and then try to get them back to one and the same place. And everything has to do with speed. Everything is okay. I wanna move fast. What is hindering me the most? And the debate is more about that than about how old is the technology on itself. Yeah.
So I'm just going to get back to the fundamentals that I started with. All good talk. I'm hearing some great stuff from you all, and yet our European big companies are not growing equity value. And I'm a pensioner today, and I'm looking to you guys so that I can invest my money and I can retire comfortably. And you're not doing anything for me. You know, why are you guys not doing anything for me?
We're now so low that you have to invest now.
Perhaps, yeah, this is the right time to invest.
The right time to invest.
I mean, the challenge here is what is valuable in the new economy? And you've all mentioned data. All mentioned data and sharing data, and it's all good. Amazon isn't sharing data. Amazon's not sharing data. Amazon is becoming the bottleneck, the cutthroat marketeers who are essentially taking over that consumer space. And believe me, they're not nice guys. They are not sharing their data, nor will they ever share their data. And they're using their data to cut out small companies. They're using their data to exploit all the interactions they have with their customers. Good luck to them. I mean, they're a big monopoly, and they're getting much bigger. So again, I think my concern here along the way for all of you players is how can we level the playing field? Because clearly the digital natives are getting a lot of valuable data, and their equity values, I think, reflect this. How can we ourselves make better use of the data we have? And if you just look at the banks have got all the data they ever need. I mean, my bank has 50 years of transactional data. They know every penny I've ever earned and every penny I've ever spent. Do you think they give us any insight into what my future financial position might be? So I think the problem we have today, and this really does go back to legacy, is how can you guys really exploit that data in the way that the digital natives are doing today?
Well, you wanted to add into here.
Yeah, it's because first I think Amazon has a monopoly because they do their job.
Yeah.
Right, and they do their job better than the others.
They do. Yeah.
It's not that they don't have just a marketplace where people can sell things. They have a complete operation that makes the life of a small seller a lot easier. And then, of course, when you do that, because there is no one can have any close to their model, you are giving away your soul because they have your data. If you are a small producer that has a heat product, they can replicate it or buy it and just put you out of the market. Because when you have a marketplace, you don't own anything. You don't own a relationship with the consumer. You just get orders. But that's a business model. So when you sign up for that business model, you know what you're signing up for, right? Or at least you should know what you're signing up for. That's the business model of a marketplace. The question of the data for me is it's like, the question is what you want to do with the data, right? So just having data itself, it doesn't mean anything. No. So why is Amazon a big player? Because they use their data to tell customers, you just need to produce this amount of items to these locations. And by the way, if you put it here, it's going to make it cheaper for your working capital. That's a good usage of data. If they just have data to show dashboards, a lot of colors, and have absolutely no meaning and no value for an operation, what you're doing, you're just drowning people because of the thing we have data. So I don't know why companies are not generating value. I know that a lot of companies are trying to disrupt themselves companies are trying to do something else by disrupting themselves, which is technically not possible. So companies have failed to adopt these new markets because they try to use their old way of working with their old processes, with their old workforce, old not by age, because it's what they are running in their business, and they try to disrupt themselves by putting something else in the middle of that organization and see, now we're going to do online, for example. Now we're going to do fast commerce, whatever. But they still have the same profit formula. They still have the same incentives. They still have the same working force. companies that have been successfully generating value by disrupting themselves, they did it by creating different organizations, more flexible, more agile. They don't have to kill the other one; it's still there, but you are generating, like what happens in the United States with the department stores and the grocery. They disrupted by creating kind of a different chain that is just different.
Can I just go to Geert at the moment?
Yeah, of course.
You're fortunate in the way that technology reinvents your business, doesn't it? I mean, going from 3G, 4G, 5G, fiber, technology is constantly reinventing your business. Does that mean that you can find new sources of value? And do I expect telco shares to go through the roof in the next 5 years?
The thing in telco is, if you think about infrastructures like mobile and fiber, and that's, I think, also reason a bit why you saw a bit what happened to our share, for example, is that these are, of course, huge investments that you have to make, but that are there for the return is only coming in the long term. And so there is hesitation in the market. There was a lot of hesitation in the market. I think now that people more start to see that the digital highways, they will be so crucial in the future, that capex that is spent in building the best digital networks is more and more considered as good capex. That the returns will come. But I must tell you that if you would have asked me this question 2-3 months ago, I would have been hesitating. It's something that we see now. You see first investor reports coming up that we should look at differently at some of those big investments that where return is not immediate, but where you have to have the confidence that these things will be so crucial over the long term that you will get it monetized. And so yeah, I think what we have to do in our industry is show that we can deliver, that on the short term we can show that yes, this works, that yes, this creates a certain dynamic, yes, that new type of services and innovations, they're coming up, and that utilization of this network is indeed growing. What we decided, and that was a big disruptive decision for us, for example, and we decided it this year, is kind of, like Rui said, kind of to split off a bit our network activity. Because the network activity in the past was there mostly to serve Proximus retail units. But if we wanted to be successful in bringing those best digital experience, we knew we have to do that completely different. So what we did is we said, no, this network, we will move it into a separate network unit that will have an independent governance from what happens in retail, that is there to interact with anybody out there. Open, the word open comes back again. Open for any service. Open for any player out there. Open for your competitor. If your competitor wants to come in, you welcome your competitor, but open for smaller players, industrial partners, open to co-invest, open to cooperate. So the word open is everywhere there. And that was a kind of, nevertheless, a disruptive move that we made. But because we believed, yes, some disruptive changes are needed if ever we want to succeed in bringing the best experience, gigabit experience, to everyone in Belgium.
Thank you very much. I'm mindful of time.
Yeah, just a small interruption here. I suggest that because we're in a flow here, that we go 5 minutes over time, so that we can make sure that we can circle everything around and come to the right conclusions, Roger.
Thank you very much. You're very generous, Henrik. So really, just to conclude, I'd like to hear from each of you. And just before that, I'm delighted that our poll, our second poll, has shown that the emphasis on operational excellence, which was at 62%, has fallen to 30%, and that customer intimacy, which was down at 21%, is now at 53%. So I think the hypothesis that we have built up in our report is actually a reality here. But just concluding remarks, Anke first. what would you say about customer centricity? What advice would you give to big corporates who are today still in an operational mindset?
Yeah, so I want to start with the banking industry. So I know what's going on here, and the big problem is that the traditional bankers are trained in products, so the credit or securities and all the other things, and that has to change. They have to think in this customer journey, and that would be my advice for my business area. So think about what is crucial for the customer in which age. So if it's 17, it's different to it's 33 or 77. So and then as Amazon did, and that's as I saw the chat of Tobias. Just do it in a seamless way for the people. Online, mobile, in the branch, but just do it in a way that it's easy for him or her to make this banking services with you, with my bank.
Thank you. Good. Summary, what advice would you give to organizations about being more customer-centric?
I think the new thing, the new kid on the block is around sustainability. It's about, like Rui said, there are bigger problems out there, and maybe saving the planet is one of them. So I think that in everything we do, what I tell now my teams is that, security, remember, a decade ago, security, you had to tell your teams, guys, security by design, security by design. Then came privacy. Guys, okay, data privacy by design. The new thing is sustainability by design. Sustainability by design. And I think that, honestly, by doing that, I think that will be very welcomed. If you're known as a player that in everything that you do, you now no longer only think about, of course, security, data privacy, that's important, but the new kid on the block is sustainability. And I'm pushing forward my teams, of course, also to think about the seamless and etc. But the new thing the new kid on the block is that one. It's saving the planet.
Excellent. Well, we subscribe to that. Erwin, your final words, advice to organizations on being more customer-centric.
Well, customer-centric from my perspective is B2B. And there, of course, you have an enormous amount of stakeholders in the question, and the key to better customer centricity for each and every one of them is collaboration. Okay. Certainly in the context of what Geert mentioned, sustainability, climate change, energy transition, mobility, and so on, which is really now is speeding up and desperately needed because we have been focusing a lot on COVID and a couple of other things, but in the meantime the clock is ticking. Europe is very ambitious, and but everybody has to understand that you have to collaborate also, because that generates outside-in innovation. And I think it's also not wrong to say, listen, we're not going to boil the ocean here, but we're going to go step by step, learn while we do, because nobody has a clue where the final result is going to be. So I would step away from big mega projects. I would start with a more agile approach. And if we do that, then I'm pretty sure that as we move on, we will all feel a much more customer focus, which is linked to how we appreciate one another. And collaboration is going to be key, also in the context of the bigger global challenges we face.
Thank you very much. I really do endorse that. Collaboration came up time after time in all the work that we've been doing recently. Absolutely critical to building new capability. Rui, last but by no means least, your advice for the future. What?
So for me, customer-centric is about, I will give first a recommendation. I recommend everyone to look at Clayton Christensen, Jobs to be Done. I had the luxury to have it as a teacher. For me, that's customer centricity. Is that the milkshake in the morning is different than the milkshake in the afternoon. So understanding that you are not selling products that you want to build, you are fixing a problem that the customer has. And so try to find a place where you add value and not just sell something.
Yeah.
And for me, we have such a crowded economy of things that we don't need.
Yeah.
Just because someone wants to make money. So somehow I have this philosophical thing that someday we're going to think about what is real customer centricity from a holistic standpoint and not just from a revenue standpoint.
Thank you all so much. Henrik, over to yourself now.